Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Perfect Building Maintenance, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Marks Paneth LLP, Capital One Bank, Collins Building Services, Meridian Capital Group. Additional support has been provided by grants from AKA Hotel Residences Corman Communities, Ariel Property Advisors, Amerant Bank, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, Chase Commercial Mortgage Lending, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Citizens Bank, Dime Community Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott INC, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Casamatides Red Apple Group, Keysight Capital Partners, Matone Group, New Banks, Newmark Knight Frank, Ocean First Bank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Services, Stonehenge NYC, SVN CPEX Real Estate Services, Tierra CRG, the Meringer Family Foundation, and these friends. Grand Central Place, Grand Central Plaza. It's a place that there's going to be amazing developments taking place. The Midtown zoning has had an effect. The Midtown zoning with the MTA, all this is going to take place. So today, my executive producer, Joe Farkas, has brought two of his friends who are in the investment business to talk about what's happening in the Grand Central Plaza. My guests include Nader Settles, who is a managing director, head of the New York City office at Nuveen Investment Management, Nuveen Real Estate. Arn Arneson, senior managing director at Rockwood Capital. And as I said before, the executive producer, Joe Farkas, chairman and CEO of Metropolitan Realty Associates. So you've invested with this individual in the past. Why do you think he's so positive for Grand Central Place? Why do you like it? I mean, your headquarters are right in the neighborhood. You own a property over there. Why do you like Grand Central?
I mean, from our view, there's two reasons. One is the connectivity. Grand Central with the new East Side access and bringing in Long Island access, and then just the connectivity from coming from White Plains. I mean, if you look at the demographics, we feel like the highest demographic right now of working population is between 25 and 35, where they're going to start to consider alternatives to move outside the city. And employers that are connected close to major transit hubs are going to benefit because those employees want to be there. And we feel like a natural sort of next phase for people's lives is Westchester. So we still feel like Grand Central is going to be, and then with the rebuilding and redevelopment of it, we feel like it's just going to serve the building, the area well.
Now, Nuveen has been on 3rd Avenue probably for maybe 40 years?
Yeah,
40, 50 years. So what type of work are you planning to do on your two main properties that you have on the 3rd Avenue corridor?
Make them office of tomorrow. So full redevelopments, amenity rich, bring in new F&B concepts, new retail, office of tomorrow technology, sustainability. We're doing some cool concepts around adding some green space and things like that.
What about roofs?
Activating some roofs that can be sort of permitted to have functional use for them.
Now, you have a building which has been a stepchild building. Okay, it was a Macklowe building, then it was a Boston Properties building, but it wasn't really a special Boston Properties because they like these really large, huge properties over there. This was a mid-block, great location, great entrance right next to Grand Central. over there. What have you been doing since you acquired the property?
Well, we've done a fair amount. We redid the lobby, and we upgraded a lot of the spaces. We also improved the leasing. We're north of 90% leased today. And again, we've been doing the upgrades for tenants in terms of amenities that they're looking for there. So someone's moving into a space. Typically, if we're building out a space to lease without having tenant in place, we'll put in, let's say, a kitchen, because people are looking for that. But the key thing that drove this investment in the first place was the fact that it's literally right across the street from Grand Central. And we were focused on the people coming in from Westchester and the ease of access there. But this is the thing. The reason why we like it even more today is because of what you brought up, east side access, which wasn't even a consideration when we bought the building. We knew about it, but it had always been, it's coming, but when is it actually going to happen? So this is just...
So here we have an individual that you've bought investments. You've all worked with Joe in the past, okay? You've done 2 properties specifically in Long Island City with Joe. How come you are so bullish on the Grand Central?
It's a pretty obvious answer. First, MRA is a value investor. So we look in the office, retail, and industrial spaces for value so we can deliver outsized returns to our investors, whether it be Naveen or Rockwood. That's our job. We identify areas where we see up-and-coming opportunity. Grand Central, on a statistical basis, the average rent is $68.21. It's 17% below the rest of Midtown Manhattan.
Why do you believe it's been a stepchild?
I think that there's been a complete suck to the west side, first of all, with related, it's great development. And I think that the age of the buildings, the infrastructure of the building, as Nadir mentioned, the amount of columns, the old systems, the technology, hasn't been able to keep up with the times. I think what's going on, and I'm just going to continue on my little rant here, I think what's going on now with the East Side access, you're going to see 162,000 new people come, new transit-oriented employees coming to the east side of Manhattan from the Long Island Railroad, where there's a brand new, below Grand Central, a brand new 350,000 square foot station being built with 8 new tracks, 25 new storefronts. It's going to be an incredible new location, and people who once considered Long Island as a kind of a stepchild, we can't move to Long Island, we can't office on the east side because we're going to be on the west side when we get dropped off on the train, now have another option. And I think that that's going to open up Grand Central and the office buildings, to more population, more users. And I think the second part of that equation is the east side rezoning, where the buildings are going to be able to be rebuilt, redeveloped. You're going to see FARs move from 12 and 15 to 17 to 27. Those are enormous numbers.
So we'll look at that and we'll talk about some of the rezoning. But here's a question for Nadir. You occupy a good portion of one of the buildings on 3rd Avenue. You could have taken that building, vacated it like J.P. Morgan, okay? Because you wouldn't have to buy out leases. J.P. Morgan is taking a building down and they're going to be building 2.7 million square feet of space over there on the Mass. You have property which could take over an entire block also. Why didn't you go to that level as opposed to readapting?
So I think J.P. Morgan made a tremendous commitment, and we commend them for taking on that kind of redevelopment project. I think from where we.
I'm not recommending it.
I mean they made a huge commitment though to the east side, right? And that took notice to everybody around for them to take on that kind of substantial project. From our perspective, we just wanted to give our employees a building that was sort of re-energized, redeveloped, refreshed from the program and the classes we offer, the amenities we offer. And we didn't feel like from the cost to do that it meant to
I agree, because people don't realize the magnitude. We're talking about a couple of properties, okay? One Vanderbilt has gone through a lot of gyrations before the rezoning. Then you're talking about the J.P. Morgan property, 270 Park Avenue, which is going to be a huge complex. But we're talking about 2025 when it's finished, okay? And what has happened, it's helped some of the other buildings in the Grand Central region because 390 Madison Avenue was vacant. They took the entire building over there. 230 Park Avenue, 237 Park Avenue are getting additional tenants, so it's helped the other buildings over there. You take the Grand Hyatt, what's going on there? You want to talk about the rezoning over there and the work?
Well, it falls into the rezoning. They're
Right.
going to take an old, antiquated building. They're going to make it modern. It's going to be tremendous. They're going
Right.
to take advantage of the increase in FAR.
Right, and what
the
they're
bonus
also doing
FARs
over
as
there,
well.
as opposed to what happened, at 425 Park Avenue, they don't have to use the original steel structure.
Right.
On that building, they're going to take down the building completely.
And that's the way to do it.
You look at the momentum as well. You look at 10 Grand Central, right next door to your building that Marks Realty just went through that redevelopment, right? And Joe talks about $68 rents and why investors kind of shied away from. Well, if you were an investor that was just buying a piece of real estate and it was more family oriented, which a lot of New York real estate is, maybe the investment thesis was a lot different. And so you didn't have the institutional appetite. Well, guess what? You have the institutional appetite now when I know I can get a nice return on my investment because I can get a great basis. But now you're signing rents with great momentum in the 90s now, as we've seen at Marks Realty building, the 10 Grand Central, and you're seeing that more and more on the east side. So if you go in there with a good basis, a good redevelopment plan, the tenants are there, they just want good product.
Right. Well, that's the key. It's the
And the
redevelopment plan and the access to transportation. That's
I mean,
That's
if
the-
you look at 10 Grand Central is right across the street from your property.
It's
Next door.
literally directly
Literally next door.
adjacent.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're talking about a building that really needed work. Okay, it was a 70, 60, 70-year-old building that looks 60 or 70 years old.
Right.
Okay,
100%.
the retail had to be changed and everything has happened over there.
Well, they actually went and changed the address because it had been a 3rd Avenue address, and they did the smart thing. They gave it a 10 Grand Central address.
I'm
And then
dating
on top of
myself.
that, they've redone the entire
Was
lobby,
it
created great
708?
amenities.
It was 708 3rd
Yeah,
Avenue.
Right,
708
yeah,
Third Avenue.
yeah. So, I mean, it was just between the marketing and what they've done to improve the building. I think Marks has done a really nice job.
I mean, when you're sitting there as Arnett and I are in the stew, to say, you kind of see everything from the ground, right? And you see all the momentum. I think why the lack of focus is on, or the focus is on the West and getting the halo effect from Penn Plaza or other sort of financial markets down in the financial district or downtown in general. There's a lot of focus on those kind of markets with the work, live, play, which stuff is starting to come over to the east side as well. So when Grand Central comes, Joe talked about all the different shops that are coming, all of the different retail that's going to come.
I'm an advocate of the Far West Side. The Far West Side has one train. And by the time you get on that train, 3 stops, there's no room. So that's not going to help. The second thing is, as you take Grand Central and compare it to the West Side, there's not enough food and beverage on the West Side. There's not parking. I mean, look, parking is difficult no matter what, and you don't want it around because you don't want the cars. But if you go to take into consideration what you have in Grand Central with the retail and everything else. And I think an example that people aren't aware of is that when Lloyd Goldman built a building about a year ago on 43rd and 44th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, people are shocked to know that they're getting rents for the residential units at as high of $120 a foot.
Yep.
So they're getting higher rents that they're getting in Lower Manhattan, higher rents that they're getting in Hudson Yards because of the convenience.
Yep.
I mean, look at all the trains. Look at the opportunities.
I think what's interesting, I started working in New York City in 1981. And at that time, I was over at 633 3rd Avenue. And they were talking about the East Side access and how within the next 5 to 7 years it would happen. Well, now it's 2019, and Joe assisted with setting up a tour. And we went on a tour, and it actually, after all these years, is actually occurring. I mean, you can see the end now. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. And what's interesting about it is, unlike Penn Station, where you have New Jersey Transit and Amtrak and Long Island Railroad, here Long Island Railroad is going to have its own actual station with no interference from anyone else. So that to me is tremendous, besides the fact that the ease of now getting to the east side from Long Island, which has always been a consideration for a lot of people, just makes it that much better. And when you put in 160,000 plus people a day coming to the east side of Manhattan, that is definitely going to drive a lot of employers to want to locate there.
Right, and I think when you actually see it, and MRA has studied it for the last 18 months, and we've been on multiple visits to really be, before we got behind our thesis, really understand that this is happening and be able to talk smartly and with conviction about it. When you see escalators and elevators and, landmark marble on the walls, and you see it really happening and you can feel it, and they tell you, okay, it's 2022, it's coming. It's $12 billion of investment. It's probably the largest infrastructure investment in the United States, let alone what's happened in New York City in the last 100 years. That's a century. That's a dynamic change to what's going to occur in New York City. I think people have to stand up, take note, appreciate what the MTA is doing. I think it's I know it's a game changer.
We're talking about the next generation of the workers, the younger, the millennials who are, they say they want to be, industry city, or they want to be in Williamsburg or all this. But even with all these large properties over there, nobody's signing leases in those markets for 100,000 square feet. They're signing leases for 20,000, 15,000. I did a show in Industry City, and I had ACOM on the show. They have an office at 685 3rd Avenue, but they opened up a supplemental office. They're not moving the corporate headquarters. Corporate headquarters like being Grand Central. I mean, the example at what happened at One Vanderbilt, which no one ever expected to be such a success over there, TD was the anchor. Today you're at probably 65, 70% rented.
They're connected to the
They're
new Grand Central.
Yeah,
Below
270
ground.
will
to
be
go
this
to
time.
see the observation room deck right from the Grand Central.
The observation decks in the city of New York are one of the highest revenue
Producer.
generators in the world, okay? What's your opinion of doing the residential in Grand Central today?
I think we're very concerned about what's going on in the rental market today. And with the price of land, it's extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, unless you have some old landowner who has a basis that makes things work to do rental. On the condo side, there's obviously a tremendous oversupply of higher priced units in the city today. So I think you'd want to get to work through a fair amount of that before, at least we would consider developing ground up. Now, you could acquire an existing property and potentially
Right,
work
because
on it.
I'm thinking on a different point of view, which is something that you guys are investment people who make decisions. There are certain B and C buildings between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, which is part of the Grand Central Corridor. Some of the properties are in the zoning that can work around, but some of them can be changed. I mean, the building that Lloyd Goldman basically built, it was a small office building, and he took both sides. He owned both properties, and he built this 60-story structure. People like living to live and work. We've seen that in downtown Brooklyn. We're seeing it in lower Manhattan. I see that there's maybe great potential even with the residential. Besides the office, I see the residential. The convenience of being nearby because of all the amenities that you have in the Grand Central area. You have the restaurants already there. You have the retail over there. Okay? You'll see some change in retail, but I think you're going to probably see the Amazon Go, because the example right now in the Grand Central neighborhood, there is an Amazon Go on 52nd Street, 53rd Street. So you're going to see more of the e-commerce over there. Would Nuveen get involved with residential?
I mean, our sweet spot for residential is more workforce housing, so garden style, middle of America, that kind of resident. Even if you were to reposition one of those buildings, it's still going to be sort of higher end rentals.
Right.
Just to make the feasibility work, even if you can make that change of use work for that being the highest and best use as well, right? I think a lot of those B buildings, for where rents are going, it might be hard to justify even changing them to residential unless they're just that obsolete, which there probably is
Right,
some buildings.
but in
that,
some of those buildings could be perfectly. I mean, your two properties that you own on 3rd Avenue have been always maintained. You've always elevated
Yeah,
the property.
that's what I mean, if they're just
okay,
deteriorating.
okay, but I'm talking about some of the properties that have been not really maintained over the years, that have been B stock or C stock for many years, and they could be changed over
I think
there.
that's the case. You got to be the right. Where we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't embark on that kind of execution plan, just because that's not how we invest for residential. But guys that do residential, and that's what sort of they do major transitions in that way. You have to do a feasibility analysis, but I'm pretty sure you can make it work.
That has been done before,
Right.
obviously. You just go downtown, and there's a whole stock of B and C buildings that were converted from office to residential.
Right, and they were converted under the 421G program when nobody was going to Lower Manhattan. So you had the incentives to build the type of residential type of properties because you're taking the space. And residential, your loss factor is different over there.
Right.
I'm going to change it just a little bit and stick on Grand Central and what's happening with East Side Access. And I think the value play and where there's opportunity, putting Manhattan aside and rent regulation, is I think follow the Long Island Railroad out to Long Island and find great spots along the major LIRR stations. That's where you can really create value, and that's where people are going to come back to Long Island because they're going to be able to take the train to the east side versus the west side.
And I think
that I love.
Relating that is the fact that what they're doing at Belmont Racetrack.
Right.
Okay, you're taking a space, you're building a stadium, you're building some hotels, and I guarantee there's going to be some residential.
Sure.
Rockwood, up until last year, owned a company called Mill Creek Residential Trust, which was the former Trammell Crow Residential. We sold it in April, May of 2018, and in fact, we did develop a number of transit-oriented development apartment projects on Long Island.
Yeah.
And right
And
now,
also in Westchester.
and Westchester, but right, correct. And we're also now with a different group developing another 250-unit apartment project next to a station in Suffolk. So we think, and totally agree with Joe, that is going to dramatically improve the draw for these neighborhoods when you have new product that's easily accessible to New York City.
Right.
Look, I think the combination of the enormous number of transit, I believe you're in the TriTech program.
Yes.
Probably in Suffolk County.
Yes.
Okay, so if you take that, because of the transit-oriented developments that have been built around Kokomo and some of the other markets that you never had, coupled with what you have in Westchester with the Yonkers, New Rochelle, Hartsdale, and other markets which are user-friendly, there's a big opportunity over there. And I think Long Island, you have more opportunities because it's been shell-shocked.
Yeah.
That you can only go into Brooklyn, and the Brooklyn had a limitation, or you could be going into Penn Station over there.
Right. It's not to make it sound like anybody can roll into Long Island and build new residential. It has its own red tape. It's not easy. It's just a place that if you were to focus, spend some time, and really use the knowledge.
So besides these two institutional investors, have we seen other institutional investors recently make a play under the idea that this market is coming to fruition, which I believe we all believe it's definitely going to come into fruition?
Just today it was announced a contract was signed on 330 Madison Avenue for, a greater than $1,000 a foot price. It was the Abu Dhabi group that sold it, took a partnership, bought out the original partners. I believe it was Vornado. They took control and recently just sold the building in its entirety. I'm forgetting who.
It's a German company.
Yeah, I think it was
About 850 mil.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a monster deal.
German insurance group.
And you're going to see that more and more. And the building, it's funny you're talking about Lloyd Golden's building, the apartment building. The building right next door, 211 East 43rd Street, is on the market now, looking for a very big number. And it'll be interesting to see who takes that down. That's just a building that comes to mind. And 900 3rd Avenue is on the market as well, a little bit outside of the Grand Central kind of sub-market, more towards the Plaza District, but it's a big deal that Cushman & Wakefield's marketing.
Right,
now.
but 900 3rd, which is 52nd, 53rd, 54th Street over there, it's not that far of a walk, okay? It's not
Doable.
that. Right, it's
I like the walk.
No, a lot of people like to walk. I think the Grand Central market is really going to come in. As you know, Arn was saying, 29 years ago, some of these plans were set up. It was like the Second Avenue subway.
Right.
Took a long time to get the Second Avenue subway, but it's helped neighborhoods that really didn't have anything to go over there. And I think what's happening in Midtown, you know, when we talk about Grand Central, we're really talking about the best part of Midtown. I recently visited the rental office for the luxury assisted living, which is being built on the corner of 56th Street and Lexington Avenue. You know, people want to be there. This is going to be an assisted living where the studios are renting for $13,000 a month.
Wow.
So, you know, Midtown is important. We hear a lot about the far west side, but it's really important what we're seeing in Midtown.
What was interesting, and I was not fully cognizant of it, is the fact that there's still a lot more work that's going to take looks like about 20 years, and that's the Grand Central Shed, which basically is where the trains come into Grand Central
Right.
under Park Avenue, and that's at this point, uninflated $2 billion 20-year project, which is going to be ripping up the malls right down the center of Park Avenue, and is going to be creating all the entrances and rebuilding, because I guess a lot of chemicals and
I mean, the
water
property,
and everything
you know,
has
the
started
trains
to
were
crumble.
built 100 years ago.
Right. So that's ongoing.
In conclusion, I'd like to say I'd like to thank our executive producer, your partner in business over there. I'd like to thank Nadir, Arn, and Joe, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.